First of all, the birth sequence is completely astrological. The star in the east is Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, which, on December 24th, aligns with the three brightest stars in Orion's belt. These three bright stars in Orion's belt are called today what they were called in ancient times, the Three Kings. And the Three Kings and the brightest star, Sirius, all point to the place of the sunrise on December 25th. This is why the Three Kings follow the star in the east, in order to locate the sunrise, the birth of the sun.
Once again, even if you were to label the three stars in Orion's belt the Three Kings, it would be irrelevant to the Bible, as is December 25th irrelevant. Though the Magi, not kings, presented three gifts, nowhere do the Bible writers make an issue of there being three of them in number. Apparently, it was insignificant to the Gospel writers, and so it is to us as well. This entire astrological premise is problematic. Not only does Sirius align with the three stars in Orion's belt 365 days a year, and not only in December, but they are more or less aligned to the sun for almost all of the winter months. There is nothing at all special about December 25th. In fact, it is by December 25th that Orion is almost totally below the horizon. It would be much more accurate of Zeitgeist if this event was said to happen a month or so earlier.
The Virgin Mary is the constellation Virgo, also known as Virgo the Virgin. Virgo in Latin means virgin. Virgo is also referred to as the house of bread, and the representation of Virgo is a virgin holding a sheaf of wheat. This house of bread and its symbol of wheat represents August and September, the time of harvest. In turn, Bethlehem in fact literally translates to house of bread. Bethlehem is thus a reference to the constellation Virgo, a place in the sky, not on earth.
Bethlehem indeed means house of bread. Nevertheless, there is no basis for concluding that Bethlehem was a fictitious place which was fabricated based upon the constellation Virgo in the sky. The existence of Bethlehem is attested by biblical and extra-biblical sources. First, Old Testament authors prior to the 1st century mention Bethlehem. Also, the Jewish historian Josephus mentions Bethlehem as the location where King David was anointed to be future king of Israel. J.B. Hennessy reports of the archaeological evidence demonstrating that Bethlehem was inhabited during the Iron Age in the 1st century. He recorded, "Perhaps most important has been the isolation in 1969 of the Iron Age tell. The limits of the Iron Age occupation, while not entirely clear, appear to be on the flat surface of the slopes immediately beneath the basilica and to the east. The work was carried out by Israel Archaeological Society. Bethlehem appears to have been a major area of occupation from the Paleolithic period." Former astrologer and author of Spellbound, The Paranormal Seduction of Today's Kids, Marcia Montenegro wrote, "You can't just make a story out of names like Virgo, Leo, Taurus, etc. And why doesn't the story begin with Aries? If it did, then Leo comes before Virgo. Yet Leo is supposedly Jesus, the Lion of Judah. It seems it would come after Virgo, not before, in a story."
There's another very interesting phenomenon that occurs around December 25th, or the winter solstice. From the summer solstice to the winter solstice, the days become shorter and colder. And from the perspective of the northern hemisphere, the sun appears to move south and get smaller and more scarce. The shortening of the days and the expiration of the crops when approaching the winter solstice symbolize the process of death to the ancients. It was the death of the sun. And by December 22nd, the sun's demise was fully realized, for the sun, having moved south continually for 6 months, makes it to its lowest point in the sky. Here a curious thing occurs. The sun stops moving south, at least perceivably, for 3 days. And during this 3-day pause, the sun resides in the vicinity of the Southern Cross, or Crux, constellation. And after this time, on December 25th, the sun moves 1 degree, this time north, foreshadowing longer days, warmth, and spring.
Anybody with a simple astrology program can confirm for themselves that during the lifetime of Jesus, or in any other time for that matter, that when the sun rises it is nowhere near the Southern Cross. The idea that the sun rises in the Southern Cross constellation is ridiculous. Dr. Noel Swerdlow is professor of astronomy and astrophysics at the University of Chicago. He also specialized in the study of the practice of astronomy in antiquity through the 17th century. He states, that crux, the Southern Cross, was not recognized as a separate constellation in antiquity because, as seen from the Mediterranean, it is low on the southern horizon and is surrounded on three sides by the stars of Centaurus, which is a large prominent constellation, and the four bright stars of crux are included as stars of Centaurus in Ptolemy's star catalog. It is only when you go farther to the south, so that the crux is higher in the southern sky, that it becomes prominent as a group of stars by itself, so its recognition had to wait until the southern voyages of the 16th century. Thus, the Southern Cross was not even discovered or recognized until the 16th century, long after the first century writers of the New Testament.
And thus it was said, the Son died on the cross, was dead for 3 days, only to be resurrected or born again.
Christians have never said anything like this, that the Son, S-U-N, died on the cross. Maybe Peter Joseph wants us to think ancient religions said this, but they did not either, and there is likewise no reference or source for such a saying.
Now, probably the most obvious of all the astrological symbolism around Jesus regards the 12 disciples. They are simply the 12 constellations of the zodiac, which Jesus, being the Son, travels about with.
The source for this claim is author and skeptic Acharya S., who alleges the Son's followers or disciples are the 12 signs of the zodiac through which the Son must pass. But Jesus did not pass through his 12 disciples in any fashion similar to the zodiac. If the Bible was based off the zodiac, we would expect to see the similar movement of Jesus through the disciples. Furthermore, the 12 disciples were most certainly assigned by Jesus because of the 12 tribes of Israel, which Zeitgeist also alleges is symbolic of the zodiac. But the book of Genesis was written approximately in 1000 BC and contains the story of the 12 tribes of Israel, which would have occurred even earlier. The division into the 12 zodiacal signs did not occur until the Babylonians made the divisions in the 5th century BC. Therefore, reading astrology into the 12 tribes upon which the apostles of Jesus were based is impossible, because the 12 tribes existed long before the division of the 12 signs of the zodiac. Astronomer J. Pasakoff confirms, the Babylonians divided the zodiac into 12 constellations in the 5th century BC. So the only evidence that remains for this claim is the number 12. If we want to accept their allegations on this, however, we also need to accept that Dunkin' Donuts is owned by an astrologer, since you get a discount when you buy a dozen donuts. Grocery stores are also owned by astrologers, since they sell you eggs by the dozen. Even our legal system must be influenced by astrology, since there are 12 jurors. Unlike fictitious myths and legends associated with astrology, we have much historical evidence that the 12 apostles were indeed real historical people. For example, in 95 AD, Clement wrote, Peter, through unrighteous envy, endured not one or two, but numerous labors, when he had at length suffered martyrdom, departed to the place of glory due to him.
In fact, the number 12 is replete throughout the Bible.
First of all, Zeitgeist stacks this list of 12s by repetitions to make it look more impressive than it actually is. The 12 tribes of Israel, 12 sons of Jacob, and 12 great patriarchs are all the same 12. There is no difference. There are 12 judges of Israel if one was to count, but the Bible never makes any issue or significance out of it. There are actually 17 Old Testament prophets, not 12. Zeitgeist missed this figure by 5. One can only wonder where they got the idea of there being 12 kings of Israel. If referring to the northern kingdom of Israel, there were 19 kings, and there were also 19 kings in the southern kingdom plus 1 queen. This is not including the 3 kings of Israel before the kingdom was divided. If you add these numbers together, you do not get 12. If you subtract, multiply, or divide these numbers, you cannot get 12. And no mention or reference is made in the Bible to 12 princes. If the king's sons are in view here, then Zeitgeist is way off, for many of the 41 kings had numerous sons, like King Ahab, for example, had 70 sons.
Coming back to the cross of the zodiac, the figurative life of the sun, this was not just an artistic expression or tool to track the sun's movement. It was also a pagan spiritual symbol, the shorthand of which looked like this. This is not a symbol of Christianity. It is a pagan adaptation of the cross of the zodiac.
What Zeitgeist refers to as the cross of the zodiac is actually the wheel of the zodiac, which has no relationship to a Roman crucifixion, the way in which Jesus was killed. To extrapolate two perpendicular lines from the zodiac wheel and conclude that Romans used this as their motivation to crucify criminals is preposterous. It was not until Christianity became paganized by Roman Catholicism that the cross image came to be thought of as a Christian symbol. Crosses in churches were introduced in AD 431, and the uses of crosses in steeples came about in AD 586.
Now, the Bible reflects, broadly speaking, a symbolic movement through 3 ages while foreshadowing a 4th.
The first age, they say, is Taurus the bull. In Exodus chapter 32, we read that Aaron and the Israelites made an idol of a golden calf and worshipped it, after which Moses shattered the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments after seeing the Israelites' idolatry. The Christ conspirators will suggest that the golden calf is the age of Taurus the bull. Where is the documentation for this supposed reality, besides page 146 of Acharya S.'s book? The New Testament, written long after the age of Taurus the bull in Jesus' generation, also mentions calves, but this is not convenient for their argument. Second, they say Moses represents the preceding age of Aries the ram. They say that Moses represents the ram and that this is the reason Jews blow the ram's horn. However, Moses is never recorded blowing a ram's horn. Additionally, Moses cannot be identified as a ram by any interpretation within Scripture, and does not fit this picture. Even Zeitgeist's own source for this claim, Leopold Wagner, says no such thing. On the page cited of Wagner's book, we read, "The use of the ram's horn at this season is appropriate, since, according to tradition, it was on this first day of Tishri that a ram was offered up instead of Isaac on Mount Moriah." Thus, even Zeitgeist's source states the obvious reality as to why Jews blow the ram's horn today, and says nothing of the age of Aries. The most memorable text in the Bible mentioning a ram is that previously mentioned in Zeitgeist's own source, where God provided the sacrifice of a ram for Abraham instead of Isaac his son. However, this event was generations prior to Moses and would not fit chronologically into Zeitgeist's twisted interpretation of the Bible.